All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of our online AWD1000 Web Development Technologies class for fall 2023. Now, the first thing I want to say is a couple of you have sent me quite a few emails, and you say, hey, I'm sorry for all these emails. Don't ever apologize. Send me all the emails you want to or need to send me. That's not a problem. That's part of my job. So I have absolutely no problem. If you send me 30 emails, you send me 30 emails. All right. A couple people had asked, and evidently, when I first went out to Teams, and I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not a big fan of Microsoft Teams. We use it, it works. But every morning you're going to get from me an email like this. It might not come until 5 to 8. It might be there by 7. And it'll have on it the URL that I'm using that day to get in. So that should work for you. All right. So that's the first thing. Now, again, I have had people who have contacted me and said, for whatever reason, there are pages missing in their book. I apologize for that. That's a publishing error. That's an error that Muroc made. I do have contacts at Muroc. All right. I am going to let them know that those pages were missing in some of the books. Now, to help solve it for chapters 1 to 3, I have sent those PDFs to you. But if it gets to be a recurring problem with any of you, that every chapter there's pages missing or whatever, please contact me as soon as possible. I will contact Muroc myself, and I will get them to send you another book. All right. And I apologize for that. Like I said, that's something unknown to me and unknown to Rankin, because with a book being 800 pages, we don't check every page to make sure it's there. So that's the first thing. Second thing, some of you have been having issues one way or another with Visual Studio Code. All right. And I get it. I mean, we went over it yesterday very, very quickly. All right. Chapter 2 that we will go over a little bit later today has a section in it on Visual Studio Code. All right. I do want to mention to you, it's very interesting. Many years ago, I was teaching at another college, and one of my graduates who was out in the field, he was a programmer. He came back and I asked him if he'd come in and talk to my class, and he did. And he said, I used to always laugh because Mr. Scott would say to me, Google is your friend, but it really is. Not only is Google your friend, YouTube can be your friend as well. And I just wanted to show you a couple things on here. And again, I'm not pushing anything at you. I'm not saying any of this stuff that I'm showing you, you ever have to take a look at. That's totally your call. All right. And I realize how precious time is to people, especially those of you who are working full time and trying to go to school full time. I know how hard that is. I've gone through that myself. When I went and got my bachelor's degree, I was working 3 jobs in addition to getting my bachelor's degree. Looking back, I don't know how I did some of the things I did. All right. Okay. But that said, if I do go out to YouTube, so let's just look at a couple of these. So let's say you're having problems with Git or GitHub. Now, I sent this to you this morning, what I said I'd send yesterday, but forgot. So this was the Learn Git in 15 minutes from Cold Steel. This is the Learn GitHub in 20 minutes from Cold Steel. And there are plenty of other ones out there. I mean, you start going through this, you're going to find so many of them. Colt is very easy to listen to, unbelievably knowledgeable. All right. I've taken some online courses with him, and he just seems to be a really good person. All right. Now, the other thing that I sent on there today is was the W3 schools Git tutorial. All right. And that was in there someplace too. There, Git tutorial W3 schools. The part of the problem that you can run into is if you do, let's say you go through 8 of these, sometimes they're going to give you conflicting information, or they're going to give you information that maybe is out of date. All right. So I'm trying to give you what I consider to be some of the better stuff. Another one, and I'm going to leave it at this, But another gentleman that I look at a lot on YouTube for stuff, okay, it's a guy named Brad Traversy. All right, he's got his own company called Traversy Media. He is an unbelievably interesting person. He's got hundreds of free um, video tutorials out there. He also has a thing where you can pay. I am one of his patrons. I do pay every month to get some of his material. He's an interesting guy. All right. He's not your typical computer nerd. No. He's a recovering drug addict. All right, who pulled himself out of the gutter basically to become a multimillionaire. And he's just another person who just gets it. So he's got a lot of stuff in there that you can look at too. Now, again, unfortunately, he does so many things. He's got so many different videos in here. All right, that some of them probably are a little bit dated. All right. Okay. So that's the next thing. Like I said, I'm trying to go through some of the stuff. All right. There was a student who contacted me who said that yesterday, let me just show you an example of what they tried to do. All right. So they came in, I don't know what that is. All right. They came in and let's just say they had a document that they created. All right. And it's just it'll be junk.txt like that. And when they did this, they wanted to come in, change this to, let's say, index.html. Now, when you click on this, it gives you the file name, but it doesn't highlight the file extension on here. So if I come in now and I type in here index.html, all right, and I hit enter, it's not an HTML file now. It's index.html.txt. You've got to make sure you remove all of it. So I'm just going to highlight the entire thing here and put in index.html. When you change the extension and you hit enter, if it beeps at you and gives you this message, then it's about to actually change the extension. So if I say yes, now you can see how the icon changed. Well, this student who got a hold of me yesterday said they realized when they did this that the extension wasn't updating. So what they had to do is they had to go back, like I showed you yesterday. They went into File Explorer. I showed you this yesterday. All right. And under File Explorer, they went into View. And I showed you this yesterday. All right. The hidden items, but they also had to make sure that this button that said file name extension, both of these were checked. So that's something that you might want to take a look at. All right. If you're having problems with anything like that, email me and let me know. All right. Now, once we really get going in here and you're working on an assignment, what you're going to have to do is, because I've had people do this ever since I've been teaching online. Hey, I've got a problem here. I'm going to send you a screenshot. Well, I can't debug a screenshot. In other words, it's a picture. So you're going to have to send me a copy of your code if you have problems. We'll get into that later when that becomes probably more of an issue. All right. Now, the same student asked me, so I'm asking you right now. There are about half of you right now are online. The other half, I would guess, are going to watch this, at a later time, which is fine. Now, this student asked me, they wanted to know if students would possibly be interested in exchanging emails. So if you wanted to, you could set up your own study group where you could sit there and ask each other and bounce questions off each other offline. If you are interested in that, please just send me an email and just say, yes, I'm interested, or no, I'm not interested. I would never share anyone's email with another student unless they told me that it was okay. I have had this happen in the past where I have had students who have created their own study groups. By and large, it seems to work really well because quite often students are willing to ask each other questions that they don't want to ask in class in fear of, oh my gosh, the instructor is going to think I'm dumb or whatever. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to just drop me an email at jpscott@rankin.edu and just say, yes, I am, or no, I'm not. All right. And the only people that I'm going to share emails with are people who send me an email that says, yes, you can share my email, or yes, I'm interested in a study group. If you don't get back to me, or if you say no, I will not ever show another person your email. All right. Okay. Just so you get, just so you know that as we get started. Now, the next thing that I wanted to quickly go over with you. All right. And that is, let's see, where are you? It is here. And I don't know where I put it. All right. Well, this morning I sent you a little later today a couple things. And the first one, let's just open them both here. This one is called helpful URLs. All right. And I'm not going to read any of this to you, but there are tutorials. There are the same GitHub stuff I promised you yesterday. This right here, that's a 4-hour course on Visual Studio Code. I can't imagine, and it's free. After that, there'd be many questions you'd have on Visual Studio Code if you went through that. Now, if you say, well, I don't have time to do that, I understand. This is about a half an hour thing from Brad Traversy, and it's a little dated, but it's got some Visual Studio Code shortcuts, which we're going to talk about some of them in just a few minutes. Again, all I'm trying to do is give you more resources. If you say, thanks for it, but I don't have time, I get it. It's not a problem. All right. And along with that, I did send you, because I should have yesterday, this was that list. I don't know why that's still on there, but you got that too. But this was the list of different Git commands. So if you wanted to find out the version of Git that you're running, we didn't do this yesterday, but we could have. All right. So just to show you these real quick, I'm going to get rid of that file because I don't need it. But when I come here and I bring this up and I type git minus, I think it's minus version, that shows me the version of Git that I'm running. Okay. I do want to mention to you that when we bring this up, notice there's git bash here, which is what I'm using. But there's also a git GUI here. All right. I've tried to teach students this in advance, and some of them get it, and some of them get nothing but confused with using the GUI version. So I stopped using it. All right. But you can go and Google that if you're interested. There's also a Git desktop, which one of my students used about 3 years ago. All right. And he loved it. And he used it all the time. And he said, you should be using that. It's a lot easier. Again, I looked at it and I thought to myself, this seems like it could confuse students. This is not what I want to do. All right. Now, some of you, again, I've got issues, not questions, rather, where students have come up to me and said, how come my GitHub doesn't look like yours? How come my Visual Studio doesn't look like yours? I will tell you this, okay? I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create, right now, I'm just going to create a folder, and I'm going to call it my junk. I'm not going to do anything in this folder that you need to copy or anything else. But if you've got a folder like this, the easiest way to open up that folder is to right mouse click on it, and you should have an option in here after you set up Visual Studio Code that says open with code. And then it should look like this when you do that. All right. So you should have this in there. Now, if you notice, if I come up here, there's 4 icons. And the first icon says new file. So if I wanted to create an index.html file, I could click on this. It asks for a name, and I could type in index.html and hit enter. Now I've got that file there. The one next to it says new folder. So I'm going to click on that one, and I'm going to type in CSS. Now I've got a folder. Notice the difference in the little icons here between these two. That's a folder, that's a file. Well, I want to create inside of this folder right here, in here, I want to create a new file. So I'm going to call this styles.css and hit enter. So now you can see that this is inside of here, because if I close that, you can't see it anymore. And I can do the same thing. I can come in here. I'm going to click in an empty area, and I'm going to again add a new folder, and I'm going to call it JS for JavaScript. And don't worry, I'm not going to put anything in it, but I'm just going to pretend I've got a file to put in it. So I'm going to click on there. I'm going to click new file, and I'm going to call this just script.js. So now you notice, if you look here, I have two folders. Those folders are three, really. This my junk, and I've got a CSS folder with styles.css in it, and I've got a JS folder with script.js in it, and I've got a file that it's not in a folder. I'm going to make one more folder, and then I'm going to go back and show you another way of doing this. So I'm just going to click off. I like to click out an empty area here. I'm going to make one more folder, and I'm going to call it images. All right, I'm not even going to put anything in there for now, but you can see that I now have three different folders. Two of the folders have a file in them, and I have a file that's all by itself. All right, so why am I doing this? I want to show you exactly why I'm doing it right now. I'm going to quit Visual Code. This is what I just created. So you can see here, there's CSS, and there's my styles.css. Okay, here is my images, which was empty. Here is my JS, which has got script.js, and here is my index.html. Now, just to show you this, I'm going to remove all of that. I'm going to highlight it and hit delete. Now it's all gone. Now I've got an empty folder. So if I brought it back up again in here, if I brought it back up again, it is empty. In fact, I guess I'd have to open it up in code. So let me do that. So if I open it up with code, you can see, all right, it says the editor could not be opened because the file was not found. Because I don't have those files anymore. We just get rid of all this, then the error goes away. But you can see that it's empty now. There's nothing in there. All right, why am I showing you that? Because if you find it confusing to create your files inside of Visual Studio Code, because I've had students tell me in the past they've had some problems with this, then go right into the folder here, right mouse click on it, choose new folder. Let's make CSS. Then we'll double click on the folder to open it. Right mouse click, choose new text document, highlight the whole thing, including the extension, type in styles.css. It should beep at me, and I want to change it. So now I've got that. Now I'm going to come back out here, and I'm back out right under my junk folder. I'm again going to right mouse click. I'm going to make another folder called images, not put anything in it, but make one last folder here called JS for JavaScript. Hit enters to open that folder. So you can see I'm inside of JS. I'm again going to do a new text document, and I'm going to change the name of it to script.js. Yes, I want to change the extension. You can see it changed. Finally, I'm going to come back out here. We don't put our we don't put our HTML files into their own folder. They just stay on the outside. So I'm going to right mouse click on here again, do a new and a text document, and I'm going to make index.html. When I hit enter, it will again beep at me. Yes, I want to change the extension. Now I've got that. And the reason I'm showing that to you is now when I close this and I right mouse click and I open it with code, everything's back. So you can do this any way you want. In other words, you can create your files, etc., inside of Visual Studio Code, or You can create them outside of Visual Studio Code. And it won't matter, all right? It won't matter which way you do it, all right? The other thing that you probably are going to want to take a look through when you have some time, maybe a half an hour, is you might want to start looking through the extensions here. There is one that's going to be discussed in our chapter today, and I think it's called HTML hint. All right, and there it is. All right, and it says a static code analysis tool for HTML. I don't have it installed. What does that do? It basically goes and looks through your document for possible things that could be wrong. My internet flaked out for a minute, sorry. And it says the editor could not be opened. I don't know why it couldn't. All right. All right, but that's it. Try installing it again. All right, now it's installed. All right. How do you use it? That'll be in the chapter today. All right. You might want to include that one. You might not. All right. There's one thing in here that you're probably going to all want to include. So you'll probably want to click your extensions. And in here, you'll want to type in live server. I've already got it in here. All right. Mine is there already. But what that does is once you have an HTML file on your system, so once you have an HTML file there, like this, if I want to run this, remember we got our shortcut here, exclamation point, tab. All right. So if I want to run this, I can get out of here. So we'll put a paragraph in here that just says hello. Oops, not there. We'll put a paragraph right here. And it's just going to say hello, hello world. All right. Now with live server, I can right mouse click on here and choose open with live server. And it will show it in just a moment. There it is. All right. Now, is that big a thing? Not at all. I can also always go out to here, go back to my desktop, double click on here, and double click on here as well. And it's the same thing. So what's the advantage of using live server over the way I just showed you? If I make a change and I'm doing it this way, I have to refresh up here, but with live server, I don't have to. All right. Now, it doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter which way you do this. Most of the time, with most of the things that we do in here, there will be a multiple number of ways of doing it. I want to say that again. Most of the time when you are working on things in here, there will be more than one way of doing it. I will show you quite often what I consider to be the most intuitive way. Or maybe sometimes if there's 6 ways of doing it, I might show you a couple of ways. Quite often I'll have a student who'll say, hey, did you know this? Sometimes I don't. But normally I do, but I don't want to inundate you by saying, hey, there's 5 different ways of doing this. I'd rather show you the way that I think is the easiest for you to use. And if you want, you can discover other ways of doing it yourself. All right. Now, maybe that's the right philosophy. Maybe it's not. I'm not sure. But like I said, that's the way that I have decided to do it. Now, the other question that I was asked by quite a few people yesterday was, can you go over the homework? What do we have to do? What is it? What's the difference between homework and labs? What's the difference between hands-on tests and written tests, etc., etc.? I'm going to lecture right now on chapters 2 and 3. And when I get done, we're going to go over all of that. All right, I promise. And again, as always, if you have any questions, you can unmute your mic at any time and ask a question. It's okay. I guess all that I ask is that after you've asked the question and you're satisfied with the answer, that you mute it back again. Because I've had that in the past too, where I've had somebody who doesn't realize that their mic is still on, and it's very hard for other people to hear me when somebody else is kind of competing with me with their mic. All right. So with that said, let's jump into chapter 2. And I should mention this too. If you had any questions from chapter 1 that I have not answered, all right, we went over chapter 1 yesterday, but if there's anything in here that you did not understand, please feel free to email me or to ask if you're in class. Totally fine. All right. Now, notice the title of this chapter, How to Code, Test, and Validate a Web Page. Those are different things. Anybody can write code. All right. A good programmer, all right, which is what you're starting to learn to become, knows how to test code. All right. And believe it or not, when you are testing code, all right, your goal is to break your code. Now that sounds a little counterintuitive. Why would my goal be to break my code? Because if you're creating code for somebody else and there are errors in it, you want to find them. You don't want them to find your errors. So you should always take a look at if you're testing something and you forgot to do something and you find that while you're testing, that's a win. That's a good thing. All right. When I was a programmer, I programmed for about 3.5 years. And then for half a year, this is before I got into teaching. Okay. Before that, I went into a quality control group where they figured out how much it cost to fix errors. And the earlier in the process that you find and fix an error, the cheaper it is to fix it. Now that should really, when you think about it, make sense. And they actually had figures on this. I worked for AT&T Bell Laboratories before they split and just became the AT&T. All right. But they found, I was looking at this big sheet one day on different types of errors, what the errors were, how much they cost to fix the errors, etc. And the cheapest error cost $50 to fix because it was found very early in the process. The most expensive error was $2.5 million. All right. And the reason that that error was so expensive is at the time, I mean, and the phones are done totally differently now. You don't have things like dial tone, long distance, etc. But they had cut software out for a new package. There was a major error in it, so they had to pull the software out and bring a bunch of people's phone service was down for a day. And that's how much money they figured they lost. All right. So testing's a good thing. We're also going to learn in this chapter how to validate. You will validate 2 types of documents. You will validate your HTML documents. You will validate your CSS documents. With each of them, the process is very similar, but you go to 2 different websites. After you go there, they're almost going to look the same. And I'm going to show you 2 different ways of doing it. And I suggest you pick out the one you're more comfortable with and you use that way. All right. Now it says, although you can use any text editor, this chapter will talk more about Visual Studio Code. They'll mention some of the stuff I've already mentioned to you and some stuff I have not mentioned to you. All right. So we'll take a look at all of that in here. So it is 8:34. I'm going to go till 9 o'clock and then we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll see where we are at that time. We probably won't have finished this chapter, but we will. Then after the break, I'll make a very simplistic little document. All right. And then I will show you how we can validate it. Then I will add CSS to that very simple document and show you how we can validate that. All right. And after we get done with all that, I'll take any questions if there are any. And then we'll jump into chapter 3. All right. And we'll see where we are for time today. All right. I will make sure, I told you this before, I'm saying it again. All right. And that is, What I'm going to do is at the end of the period today, I will explain to you basically 3 or 4 things. And those are, I'll show you if you can't find them or didn't find them or whatever, where you have your written tests, where you have your homework, where you have your labs, all right? And I will explain to you different ways that you can submit them. What I'm planning on doing tomorrow, just because, I mean, with a lot of you, this is your first class. I applaud the fact you want to succeed. So what I'm thinking of having us do is for the first whole set of homework, everything that's due next Monday, we'll just do all of it together. All right. So we'll do the written tests together. We'll do the labs together. We'll do the homework together. All right. So we'll do that tomorrow. After we get done with that, because believe it or not, we'll be able to do that and it will not take the entire period. Then what I'm going to do tomorrow is give you one of those pre-tests. Some of you have said, I don't understand the difference between written tests and these hands-on tests that you talk about. So I'm going to show you a pre-test. In other words, what your first test is going to look like. All right, so we will do that. All right, then on Thursday by 7 a.m., I will send you a copy of the first test that you will take. Okay, and then between 8:05 and about 8:20, I will go over the steps for the test. You will have until midnight that night to get everything turned in, and I'll make sure I show you how to do all of that stuff. All right, so let's jump into chapter 2, HTML syntax, followed by CSS syntax, followed by some talk on how to use VS Code, then testing and debugging, and the chapter ends with validating. Now, one thing I like about these books, one of the reasons, and if you hate this book, you can blame me. You can blame Evan as well, all right? But you can blame me. I'm very much a proponent of these books. I like them. All right. And one of the reasons I like them is they typically, and they'll do it in here, when they introduce something, they'll typically try to tell you, hey, you can do it like this if you want to, but best practices say you should do it like this. I mean, if you're going to learn to do something, you might as well learn to do it right. Okay, so let's get going in here on chapter 2. All right. So the first thing they're going to talk about is the basic structure of an HTML document. One of the things, for whatever reason, in Muroc, they go nuts in here is they want you to spell it like this and capitalize it like that. It doesn't matter. This is the one line you can put in all caps if you want to, or a capital D and a lowercase OCTYPE, or a totally lowercase. It doesn't really matter. That should be the top line that you put in every HTML file that you create. That says that this is an HTML5 document. In other words, it's the newest, it's the latest, it's the greatest. What I'm going to do later is I'm going to take that line out. Okay, I'm going to take that line out. I'm going to first try to see if I can validate a document and have it work. Then I'm going to remove some stuff on it on purpose. So you can see what happens if you try to validate a document that doesn't have everything in it that you would think it has or it should have. All right. Under that doc type, you're going to have your beginning HTML tag. As it says, this is sometimes referred to as a root element. All right. So if we take a look over here, this is, believe it or not, this is an unbelievably simplistic picture of the basic structure of an HTML document. And what I mean by that is there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But, you know, to say ... here means there's stuff in there. So they're not showing you meta tags in here. They're not showing you a title. They're not showing you a link where you can link to CSS files. They're not showing you a script tag in here where you can link to JavaScript files. And in here, you can break this up into a header section, a main section, a footer section, and there's other ones. And we'll see those when we get to chapter 3 today. There's nothing wrong with a picture. All they're basically trying to tell you is every HTML document should have a doc type declaration at the top, beginning and ending HTML tags, beginning and ending head tags, and beginning and ending body tags. So in other words, if I went back into here, all right, and we've done this kind of thing before, but literally if I went into here and remove this, and I remove this, like that, whoops, and I remove this, all right, and I don't know why it's showing me that. It says title must be present, all right, but technically that is a valid document. Maybe it would want a title tag in there, I don't know. But notice there are no errors in here, all right? It's not going to do much because there's nothing in the body section. Remember, whatever you put in here is what renders on the screen. The stuff you put in here does not show on the screen. The title does show up here. All right. Now I can highlight all of that, get rid of it, and bring it back again by just putting in the exclamation point. All right. So they show you an example. And the biggest takeaway from this simple document is by now, the stuff that's in here that is shown right here should make sense to you. All right. Now you might say, well, I don't know exactly how to do this. No, but what I'm saying is you should now understand what a doc type is, what an HTML tag is. We're using the English language. There's our beginning HTML and our ending HTML tag. What you put in a head section, meta tags, titles, and as we move on, we'll have links to CSS files and links to JavaScript files. And in our body, this is what shows on the screen. That's an H1. I showed you yesterday, there's H1 through H6. The smaller the number, the bigger the text. And there's 3 paragraphs. The last paragraph is a hyperlink. So this speaker information will be underlined. And if you click on it, it'll go to a place called speakers.html. All right. Now, here are some of their, when they give you these general coding recommendations, I want to read to you. All right. They recommend you use lowercase. That's the way people do it. Other than the doc type tag, basically everyone uses lowercase for every HTML tag there is. That's just an unwritten standard. Okay. If you want more about the doc type that I've given you, maybe there's probably a little bit more in here. All right. How to create elements and tags. Almost all tags have a beginning tag like this and an ending tag like this. You can see the difference between them. The ending tag has a slash in it. All right. There are some tags that are called empty tags. The BR tag stands for line break. That'll put a blank line in there and it goes by itself. Just so you know, it's not a big thing one way or another, but some people have a problem with putting in a tag that looks like this. Let me make this nice and big. They don't like having a tag that looks like this. So it is acceptable to put BR slash like that. I don't even know if you need the space. I always put one in. Sometimes some software will put that in there to show that as a beginning and an ending tag. All right. When you do an image, and we did an image yesterday, it's like IMG, you must put the source in there. That's where your image is. So if I say it's in an images folder and it's called hello.jpg, something like that, you should always put an alt tag in there. Now, I can put this on another line. I don't want to take anything within double quotes like this and put that over multiple lines because that'll confuse the system. But if I want to do this and put it over multiple lines and I'll say alt equals, let's say, picture of a sunrise, something like that. All right. Some people then at the end will go like this and some people will just do this. Right? I guess I'm used to doing it this way, but that is another example of an empty tag. All right, so BR, there's another one that you're going to see soon that's called an HR tag. That's a horizontal rule, and it'll put a real light gray line that kind of looks like this blue one here. All right, so some tags must have a closing tag. Some tags do not have a closing tag. All right. Not only that, when you look in here, and this is similar to the example I just showed you. All right. The tag is an image tag where it says SRC and where it says ALT. Those are called attributes. It's kind of like if I put in here your name and then I said your height is this and your weight is this, or your eye color is this and your hair color is this. Some tags require attributes. To put an image tag in there with no attributes would make no sense. You wouldn't have anything to add. Some tags require no attributes, again, like the BR tag. And then they talk about nesting here, all right? And there's two examples here. And these examples show good nesting and bad nesting. All right. Why is this good? Because the P tag starts here and the P tag ends here. And in between there's an I tag. On the other example, the P tag starts here and ends here, and the I tag is not nested inside of it. Here it is. And if that didn't make sense to you, all right, what's going to happen is when you create this, if you do it the wrong way, and you go and validate the document when you're done, you're going to run into, it'll show you errors. We'll look at some of that in a little bit. All right. So as it says, elements are commonly nested. You must enclose the inner set before enclosing the outer set. And again, with some of this stuff, as the saying goes, I can talk till I'm blue in the face. And until you have these problems yourself, it won't make any sense. I always tell the story, I'll make it short and sweet. The first programming class I ever took, all right, it's a language that's not even used much anymore, all right, it doesn't matter. But the point is, you had to put periods all over the place. I missed a period near the top of my program. And I ran the program for the first time, and I had 129 errors, all right? I put in that one period, and it went down to like 34 errors. And I felt pretty good. The guy next to me typed in his program, had no errors, and thought, this isn't hard. I learned a hell of a lot more from that program than he did. And I will tell you, because he ended up becoming a friend of mine, that as we went on, he made plenty of errors. But I was able to help him because I had seen those errors before. All right, they talk here about a Boolean attribute. And when you think Boolean is either on, off, yes, no, true, false, etc. All right, you're going to become intimate with Boolean variables as we go on in here because you're going to create a lot of them. All right. So again, here are some examples of attributes. This is a Boolean attribute. And it's kind of funny right here, this checkbox, putting the word checked in here will mean that indeed that checkbox will be checked by default when the program starts to run. It used to be, and I don't know why they did this, you used to have to say, instead of checked, you had to say checked equals checked. I don't know why, but you did. All right. And you don't anymore. You still can, it won't hurt anything, but it doesn't help anything either. Notice in here, for example, it says ahref, and this is in double quotes. You can use double quotes or you can use single quotes. They recommend always using double quotes, as do I. Now, the other thing is, technically, if you look right here, there's no blank space in there. So it probably would work even if you didn't use double or single quotes, but you should anyway. Here, since there's blank spaces, you must use quotes, double quotes or single quotes. All right, and that's pretty much what they're telling you in here. I don't want to sit and read to you. All right, so again, This is the attribute href. That's the attribute value. Contact.html. This is the attribute title. This is the attribute value. Click to contact us, etc. This class we're going to discuss later today, so don't worry about that. All right. If you want to put in comments, and I think I showed you this yesterday, these are the comment delimiters. So comments, to start a comment, you put in a less than sign, an exclamation point, and a dash dash. To end a comment, you put in a dash dash greater than sign. All right. And you'll notice the way that our editor works, that if I come in here and put in a beginning comment, not right there, why I keep doing that, but if I come in here and put in a beginning comment, it automatically puts an ending comment in there for me. So if I hit enter, there we got it. You can put as many lines in here as you want. All right, I mean, literally I could do this is a comment. I don't know why I do that, but I could. All right, speaking of that, this may or may not surprise you. All right, I'm going to put a paragraph in here and get rid of this. And I'm going to move this ending paragraph. I'm going to move it down here. All right. So I've got a paragraph that says this is a comment. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to open it in Live Server. And notice it's all on one line. That's because by default, white space gets eaten up. White space is you hitting the space bar, or it's you hitting the tab key, or it's you hitting the enter key. Notice if I put a whole bunch of that in here, all right, and I run it again, still looks the same. If I do want to put this over 4 lines, I don't know why I'd want to do that, but let's say that I want to put this over 4 lines. All right, I'm just pretending here I do. There's different ways of doing it. Probably the easiest way is to put a BR tag here and put another BR tag here and another BR tag here. Now notice if I do that, it is over 4 lines because I put line breaks in there. All right. Now let's say that I don't want to do that, but between the and comment, I want there to be a bunch of spaces. Well, notice again, if I put these in and I click that, they're gone. But hey, I want those. How do I put 5 spaces in here? I can put in what's called a character entity, which you're going to see later either in this chapter or the next one, but I can put in here ampersand NBSP. That means NBSP. That means non-breaking space. All right, so I'm going to put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those. Now notice I've got my spaces. All right. So even though sometimes the way that this works is a little quirky, all right, you can usually, there's workarounds for almost anything that you want to try to do. All right. Okay, let's keep going here. So again, there's more about comments and white space. I think I've hit the high points in there. Okay. All right. Now, for the first time, we're going in and we're talking CSS syntax. There's going to be stuff in here when we start on this that you probably will find confusing. It's totally fine. All right, I'm going to go back to my web page first. I'm going to get rid of those non-breaking spaces. And what I'm going to do, you may find this cool, you may find this weird, I don't know. I want to put in like 3 or 4 paragraphs of garbage text. Now I could just sit and type a bunch of stuff, but I can also go out to a website and there's multiple like this, but I can go out to one that's called Lipsum, lipsum.org. All right. And I can tell it in here, I want 3 paragraphs worth of junk, and it gives me those. So I now have 3 paragraphs worth of junk. There's a reason I'm doing this, so just bear with me if you would for a second. All right. So there's my 3 paragraphs. They're real long, as you can see. I want to put each one of them inside of paragraph tags. And then I'm going to run this to show you what I've just done. All right. So I've now got 3 paragraphs worth of stuff. And if I run this again, so you can see what I have now. There's my 3 paragraphs. Okay. I mean, why did I do this? Because I want to show you a few things. All right. Above this, I'm going to put an H1 tag in here. Then it's just going to say my web page. Like that. All right. And now I'm going to run it. There it is. Nothing fantastic about this. Nothing that really, hopefully, at least surprised you, etc. But I now want to go in and I want to go into that styles file that we have and start to style this a little bit. All right. So what you're putting in here are basically what are known as style rules. First thing I want to do is I want to say all H1 tags, and there's only one, but I could have several. All right. I want to make, let's give them a background color. All right. And we'll make this bisque, B-I-S-Q-U-E. All right. And we'll make color. We're going to make that navy. Okay. All right. That's all I've done. You can see it. Now, I can't right mouse click on this and run that live server. You can only run live server from an HTML file. So now when I do this and I run live server, you're like, wait a minute, nothing changed. Well, it didn't. And maybe you know why nothing changed, maybe you don't. The problem is in my head section, I never linked my HTML file that I'm in with my CSS file. So let's do that. So I can type in link and hit tab and now put in here CSS/styles.css. Now I'm opening up the communication between the HTML file that I'm in and this styles file right here. So now if I run this, you can see the difference. Now notice how this goes across the whole page. All right, this is what's called a block element. We're going to talk about that later. All right, what if I don't want this to go across the whole page? That's too big for me. All right, well, I can always go back in and do stuff like this. So I can go back into here and I can say, you know what? I want the width of that to be 25% of the page as opposed to 100. All right, now let's go take a look and you can see how it changed. All right, but what I'm trying to get across to you here, what I'm trying to show you is that right now, the way that this is set up right here, this is going to change every H1 tag that I put in there. So if I put another H1 tag down here, I don't know why I do that, but let's just do it. And this is some text. All right, and I run this again. You can see it looks the same. In fact, it went over 2 lines because it wasn't wide enough, all right, at 25% to fit. So that is going to go and change every single one of these. And so a natural question would be, okay, what if I only want to change the first one and I don't want to change the second one? All right, so I want to change this first one, but not this second one. All right. So one way that I can do it, and as always, there's multiple ways of doing what I'm about to show you. All right. But I'm going to come up to this first heading right here. Okay. And I'm going to say ID equals, oops, title, like that. I'm giving it a name. We're going to look at IDs right now, then we're going to look at the word class. With an ID, there should only be one of these on a page. I'm saying this again. There should only be one of these on a page with an ID. So I'm going to go back into here, and instead of H1, I want to use that ID of title, but I can't just type in title like this. If it's an ID, I have to preface it with a pound sign. So let's look at that and let's run it. Now you can see that one is styled and this one is not. All right. Now to go on a little further, because I'm going to make a change to what I just did, let's pretend that not only do we want this title here to be bisque background with blue text, but for whatever reason, we also want that paragraph to look the same. In other words, we want that paragraph also to have blue text and a bisque colored background. Well, with what we've got right now, we can't do that exactly. But if I change this from ID equal to title, I'm going to change this to class equal title. And then I'm going to grab that class equal title and I'm going to put it on our second paragraph. All right. Then I'm going to come back here to styles. And instead of having a pound sign, I'm going to have a period, which means it's a class. Now, when you look, you can see what happened. And it also, notice it made this just 25% of the screen. So instead of running over 100% like this one and this one do, it only uses 25 now. But they're basically styled the same. All right. Now, do I expect you to remember this? Do I expect that everything I just told you makes 100% sense? No. You're going to learn just as much, if not more, from making mistakes and trying things on your own than you are listening to me. All right. I'm looking at the clock. It is 9:01. All right. At least on mine. Let's take 9:02. Let's take 10 minutes and come back. I'll leave that up there just as it is. Come back at 9:12, please. I got to get another water. I'll be right back. All right, it is 12 after, so let's continue on. All right. Now I showed you some examples, and here's the actual syntax for it. So whatever you put before the set of curly braces is called the selector. What comes after the first beginning curly brace is the property. And then after that is what's called the value. So again, hopefully you can look at this and it makes sense to you. This says we want to take every H1 tag we have and give it a text color of navy. All right. Now, just so you're aware of this, there are a lot of different ways that you can specify color rather than just words. I mean, there's a lot of words. There's probably 200 or so, but for some colors, they don't have an associated word. So you use other ways of expressing it. We're going to get to that in later chapters. Also, if you write comments in CSS, comments must start with a slash followed by a star like this, and must end with a star or asterisk followed by a slash like you see here. And they can be one line or multiple lines. All right. Now you'll notice here, this has got background color. Let's grab this one. I'm not going to be able to copy it. It won't let me, but I'm going to do this just to show you something here. So I'm going to grab this body, and don't worry, it'll be bigger in just a second, but background color pound FACD 8A. And we're going to go over what all that stuff means in a later class, so don't worry about it. There is a reason, though, that I'm grabbing this, and that is I want to put it into my actual CSS file. All right. Since it's body, I'm going to put it at the top. I don't even know what color that is, to be honest with you. All right. It looks like it's kind of a gold or a yellow. All right. Let's change this. Well, we can leave it at this, but it's pretty close. So let's make this red. All right. And just because I want to show you something here, and that is when you look here now, you'll notice what changed. When I said body and I gave it a background color, that said try to take the entire document and make it that background color. But then after that, we said, hey, you can override that if you've got something that has a class in it of whatever we call that class, which was title, which is not a great name, but it still works. All right. But this overrides this. So if I set stuff up for the body, by default, it's supposed to do that for the entire document. So if I come in here and say, for example, font family, okay? And we're going to get into what all this means, so don't worry about it. But I'm going to put in here Arial, okay? And then I'm going to say font size, and let's put in here 1 rem. Watch how different this is going to look when we get done. And I want you to realize something. This says set it for the entire document. Since I'm not resetting it here, watch what happens here now. And all of my text is bigger, and it's a different font type now. All right, you may or may not be able to tell that, but these are things that, you can make a lot of changes with CSS, okay? And we've started talking about this. Remember, HTML is your content, CSS is your styling. All right, so let's jump back into here. And, this is just more of the same. I'm not going to read this stuff to you. I'd rather demonstrate it. All right. So we've already looked at some of the basic selectors, body, H1, an ID with the pound sign, a class with a dot. All right. So you can see all those. Again, if I do something like this is going to be an error. So if I come in here and I say class equal title, all right, but instead of putting in a dot, I make a mistake and I put in a pound sign, watch what happens. It all looks the same. It's like, what happened? I said I delineated inside of my HTML that this was a class. However, in my CSS, I treated it like it was an ID. It didn't understand, so it just did nothing. All right, and you could argue with this, but in a way, it did what you told it to do, which was nothing. And if I go back and make that a dot again, all right, and run this, it'll look just the way that it did previously. All right, okay. All right, so the next part in here, as you can see, the next several pages is on how to use Visual Studio Code. All right, and they talk about how you can work with folders, etc. And I've shown you in here how you can go in and you can create a new file, you can create a new folder. I think that's refresh, and I don't remember what that is. All right, but they go through here and how to open. Well, it's pretty easy to open things in here. I don't think we have to talk about that. I don't know why you'd want to hide stuff, but you can if you want to, and you can rename things. So again, I could come in here, and if for some reason I decided that, I came back to here, over to here, and I didn't like the name of this as being index.html, I can right mouse click and choose rename. I can do that with any of these if I want to. I can delete from here. There's a lot of stuff that I can do. All right. Okay. If you had problems with VS Code, they give their own way of installing it. I don't think it's going to be very different from what I showed. All right. They talk about working with files. Again, you will learn this stuff by working with files. All right. So how to open it. You can preview a file. I don't use that. I don't like the way that that works. How to save and close files. How to add new files. I've told you most of the stuff that's in here. All right. This, what you're going to find is by default, every time you create a new file or a new application, you might get that welcome page. If you get that, as it says, you can scroll down to the bottom of the welcome page and there is a checkbox that says display welcome page. If you uncheck it, then it won't show the welcome page anymore. Okay, it's not a big thing. All right, then editing. In here, they talk about editing a CSS or an HTML file. This, you may or may not have noticed this before, but if I come in here and start to type, so if I come in here and start to type, all right, and I come in here and do something like this. Let's say that I'm going to put in a new paragraph tag. All right, in fact, let's get rid of this one that's here. But when I do this and I put in a slash, well, it automatically puts in an end one. If I write something goofy in here like hello, all right, and I put my ending one, notice it puts an ending hello in there. Whatever you put in here, it puts it in. All right, but what I'm trying to get to is, again, when I do this and I put in a P, notice it thinks you want to change it, but it also shows me other things that can be done in here. This is known as IntelliSense. So if I want to accept that one, I can do it myself, or I can just hit the tab key and it'll put it in as well. All right, but usually I'm going to do it like this and end it myself because it puts, oops, it'll put an ending tag in for me also. All right, and there's a whole lot of stuff. Emmet allows you to do a lot of different things. All right, Emmet is what I've shown you so far. When we hit the exclamation point, we got all this stuff, but there's a lot of other stuff that you can do with Emmet. All right, so let's see, let's continue on. So they give you some common coding errors. Yeah, I don't disagree with any of the things that are in here. You're going to misspell stuff because you're human. You're going to think you're using something one way and you're using it another way. You're not going to have an ending tag type of thing. Right? Everybody does it. There is that enter the exclamation point and tab to get your starting code. You can split the screen if you want to with a view editor layout. So if you want to work at the same time on both your HTML and your CSS at one time, you can do that. Okay. This is that HTML hint that we talked about before. I've already shown you how you can go in and how you can install that. There it is. I think mine was orange. Stuff changes over time. It's no biggie. But they will show you in here then where potential errors are going to be. All right. And like right here, you might say there's no error there. Yes, there is. There's no closing. There's the beginning, the less than sign. There's no greater than sign here. All right. And it'll show you stuff like that. So as it says, if it detects a syntax error, it underlines it with a wavy line. Okay. You don't have to use this. If you find that to be a pain in the butt, so if you have installed it and don't like it, you can always go back and uninstall it. All right. Again, they talk some more in here about, you're going to find this can be really nice. Notice they've got H2 and they put a B in there. These are all the different things that start with B that you can put in as CSS. All right. And if I type in a BA, this list will change and it should only show background color and background. That's it. Some people, when they hear that, they go, oh yeah, I wanted to ask, then what's the difference between background color and background? Believe it or not, there is none. You can either type in background hyphen color or just background. Either way will work. All right. So notice with the common errors, a lot of them are the same. You do have to, after every single thing that you put into, notice they spelled padding wrong and how that HTML hint picked that up. All right. You do have to put after every one of these things a semicolon. So, here is basically the property or whatever it is you're working on, the curly braces, and these are your selectors and your values. The only one you don't technically have to put a semicolon after is the last one, but most people put a semicolon after each and every one of the ones that are in here. Okay. The live server I showed you already. All right, you can go to extensions and load it, and then you can click, there's even a go live icon, so you can click that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. And one thing, because I've had people say this to me before, you do this a certain way. Did you know you could do it that way? And sometimes I'm just kind of set in my ways. I'm not going to be brash enough to say that the way that I do this is always the best way and it's the way you should do it. No, the way you should do all this stuff is the way that makes the most sense to you and the one for which you have the biggest comfort level. That's what you should do. All right. Okay. All right, let's get to test and debugging. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this page that I already have. There's not a lot in it, but we'll be able to do it anyway. And I'm going to make sure, so I'm going to do a file, save all, so everything's saved. So here's my HTML page, and here's my CSS page. They've both been saved. All right. So when I want to validate these, when you validate, what you're doing is you're having an independent outside source look at your code and say, everything looks good, or you have errors. And if you say, I don't get it, then just watch. All right. So here's the file and it's index.html. So I'm going to go out here. And if I want to find that file or the validator, I can come in here and I can just search in here for HTML validator. And there's more than one. The one that we're going to use exclusively in here is the first one, the W3C, or the World Wide Web Consortium Markup Service. That's the one we're going to use. All right. So you come in here, validator.w3.org, you click it, and there's two basic ways that you can do this. I'm going to show you what I think is the easier way, and also another way you can do it, but I think it's a little harder. You're going to have to do it the way you think is the easier way of doing it. All right. So the first is validate by file upload. So I'm going to click on here, and it says choose a file. So I'm going to click here. I am going to go to my desktop, and it's my junk, and it's index.html. So there it is. And I'm going to click check. And you'll notice it comes back green. Green is good. Document checking completed. There are no errors or warnings to show. I'm going to show you one more way to check this, and then I'm going to purposely make some mistakes in here. All right. Sometimes people don't like to do it that way. They like to open their file, like we've got it open already. They like to highlight the whole thing, copy it to the clipboard, Control C to copy it to the clipboard, then go back into here where we just were and choose validate by direct input and paste that whole box in there. All right. And then click check. I used to always do it this way. All right. To be honest with you, I almost never do it that way anymore, because to me, the first way I showed you was easier. All right. So let me get rid of all this. I think it's easier to validate by file upload. Choose your file name, boom, and click open. Once that's in there, click check. I think that's easier. It's brief. It's more brief in what it shows you. Well, let's go back in here and let's make some errors on purpose. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the file. All right. And I'm going to comment out. All right. I'm commenting out our doc type. So that's not technically in there anymore. All right. And it's telling me already, hey, you want that in there. That's okay. All right. And if it gives me an error, I'll just remove it and then put it back again. I don't know. Maybe it won't even like that I'm doing it that way. All right. So let me do a file, save again, and let me go back into here. All right. Now you'll notice error. Start tag seen without a doc type first. It's giving me as much information as it can. It's letting me know that on line 2, the first line technically of my document is that HTML line. Now, pink is an error. So this means this did not validate cleanly. The reason I want to show you that, the reason that that's important is I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to take this out. But I'm going to come to the next line where we've got language equals English, and I'm going to remove that. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to save it again. All right. Sorry, my neighbor's mowing. I didn't realize that was happening today. So I'm going to come back in here again. All right. And I'm again going to choose file and click check. Now you'll notice yellow is a warning. That means that it's not enough to, basically it's not an error, but it's warning you that it's saying, hey, you should really add a Lang attribute in here. So I've shown you now 3 different things. I've shown you when it's green, meaning that everything validated correctly, when it's pink, meaning there was an error, and when it was yellow, meaning there was a warning. All right. And there's all sorts of ways that you can get errors in here. Let's just look at a couple more. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to put my language back in, but I'm going to remove the tag here, my ending CSS tag. I'm going to grab one of these paragraphs and I'm going to remove the end tag. All right. And that's enough for now. All right. So I'll come in here and do another file, save, and I'm going to come back in here. And again, choose my file. I keep re-choosing it so I get the most up-to-date version. And you'll notice now I get a bunch of errors and warnings. All right, because one error can propagate and lead to other errors. So it's saying right here, hey, I saw this, I didn't see on the end here, somewhere in this CSS, there's no ending tag. All right, and it's actually flagging it, it looks like more than once. Will give me a warning too. It doesn't know what the heck this is. So it's marking all those as being wrong. All right. And it says head not allowed. So it's reached the end of the head section, but it didn't find that ending. So there's all, like I said, that one error is leading to almost everything we have. And if we go back in here again, and let's add that back in. All right. And so now what we have is we still have errors in here. We don't have an ending tag here. Let's leave this H1 tag off too. All right. So let me do a file, save all or save, and go back and run it again. And again, you'll notice there's a bunch of errors. Basically, it's saying it doesn't see the end of the H1, so it thinks this paragraph tag is part of an H1 tag, which is not allowed. So you can see I'm getting a bunch of different errors in here. All right. So the system is coming through and it's doing the best it can to actually show me what's going on in here. I'm going to put that back in and I'm going to re-add. Where's the other one? Right here. And whoops. And I think that's everything. We'll see. File. Save. We'll look at it again. Again, choose, make sure I've got the most up-to-date copy. Now it's still giving me a warning. Did I leave off that language equal English? Let's look. Lang equal EN. So I don't know what the problem is there. Lang equal EN. That looks correct to me. Warning, this document appears to be written in Catalan. I don't even know what that is. All right, it says Lang equals CA. I've never seen that before. That's a weird warning, but that's okay. All right, if you ever get something like that, that might be something you can't even fix. I don't know. So let's look at the other one. And it's not W3 with a name. It's actually called Jigsaw. So I'm going to come in here and now I'm going to type in CSS validator. And you want the one that says the W3 CSS validation service, but it's jigsaw.w3.org. Looks very similar to the other one. Again, I can come in here and do an upload, choose my file, go into CSS, choose style, and it's a little bit different because when I check, notice I get this kind of like seal of approval here. Congratulations, no error found, and I get this. But I can go back in and just like we did previously, I can start to purposely introduce errors. All right, because again, that's the way we're going to learn. So I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to I'll remove that semicolon and that semicolon, and I'll spell title wrong. Just so you can see a few things that are in here. You can see that it's already marking some of this stuff for me as being in error. But I am going to come in here and do a file save anyway. And I'm going to come back and choose my file styles and do it again. And you'll notice now it's red. We have found two errors. All right, missing a semicolon before font size. Well, let's look at that one. All right, there's font size, missing a semicolon. It can't be much more specific than that. So I'll put that semicolon in and we'll save it. We'll come back to here. Oops, back to here, and we'll run it again. Now it says one error found. It says missing a semicolon before the property name color. And we've got height here. Well, let's look at that. So we're missing that, but there actually is another error here. It's not going to find it though. This technically is not an error. What it's saying is it's expecting we have a class named tight. We don't, but that's not really an error. All right. So if I save this, I think it's going to validate cleanly. And it does. Now, if I bring that back up, since we don't have a title class, we've got a tight class, it looks like that now. All right. So what it is finding, what these validators are finding are more or less syntactical type of errors. If I call this title, but I call this tight, that is not a syntactical error. That is a logic error. All right, because it's one you made. Now doing this as we just did and coming back in here, now it looks the way that it had looked. Plus, if we go back into here, oops, and we run the validator again on this, it was successful, but it should still be successful. And it is. All right. All right, let's jump back to the book. We're almost done with this chapter. So that is how to test and debug. I tried to show you everything in here. All right. So they showed you some stuff in the book. And again, how to validate. That's what we just did. And again, you know, you've got to really and truly look at it that if you are writing something and you find an error, in all seriousness, it's a good thing. Because maybe you had a misunderstanding of how something was used or whatever, and now you don't. And will you make the same error again? Of course you might. All right. But I've said this to students before, that if we were in the classroom and you had a fairly simplistic error and you raised your hand and you said, hey, I can't figure this out, and I showed it to you, there's probably a pretty good chance you'd make that error again. But if you're working by yourself and you find an error and you debug it yourself, there's a pretty good chance you won't make that error again. All right. Okay. So again, that was the CSS file. And that's it. All right. So I'm going to jump right into chapter 3. As always, as I'm going through this, if you have questions, please, unmute yourself and ask. It's totally fine. I'm not going to go through the summaries at the end of the chapter. They're pretty good. All right. And when you're working on the written tests, sometimes people have told me they'll have that page open in the book because sometimes some of the answers are, or they can figure out the answers from what's there. All right. Now, just so you're aware of this, these exercises that are shown here in your book, all right, you have these exercises, both the starting exercises and the completed exercises. When I sent you all that stuff at the beginning of the semester, it said like book apps or something like that. So you have all this stuff. You have all the applications that are created throughout the chapters, and you have the exercises. Maybe it's under exercises. I don't remember, at the end of the chapters. So you have all this. We don't have time to go through all these, but especially if you're struggling in this class, it might not be a bad idea for you to at least look at some. All right. As always, that's your call. I don't want anybody saying, well, he told us we have to do this. No, I didn't. All right. So let's jump into chapter 3. Chapter 3 is how to use HTML to structure a web page. All right. So some of this we have looked at already, or looked at least a little bit already. But we'll talk about what goes into the head section. All right, a little bit more, where it's got these contents. And we're going to talk about, we mentioned this name the other day, and that is that the idea with HTML5 is it's supposed to be semantic. And that's where these structural elements will come in a little bit. We'll talk about other elements, and I want to make sure you understand the distinction between inline elements and block elements. We'll talk about that when we get to that point in here. Some of this stuff we looked at already. We looked at how to code URLs. We looked at how to code links and lists and images. We'll look at it again. And the chapter ends with, as it says there, a structured web page. It's a pretty simple web page, but it's fine. This is not a long chapter. All right. We may finish this before our next break. If we don't, fine. All right. Otherwise, we finish it after the break. Then we're going to jump right in and we're going to look at what your homework will be, what your labs will be, etc. Now, if we can get to that point, even for instance, in about an hour from now, then what I'll probably do is end class and ask you to try yourselves to do the written tests, to do the homework, and to do the labs. And then what we'll do tomorrow when we start the class is we will go over that stuff. All right. Now, when we do the written tests, it's interesting because the last time I taught this class, there's 14 of you in here. And the last time I taught it, I think there were 10 people. And 9 of them worked full time and never came to class, ever. One of them, Grant, was there all the time. So when we did an exercise like this, it was just me talking with him. So it was a little bit different. But tomorrow, if we go over the chapters 1, 2, and 3 written tests, if you want to unmute your mic and try to give me what you think is an answer, that's fine. If it's quiet, I'll just give the answer. I don't really care one way or the other. All right. So in here, again, all this stuff that's in here. So let's get to it and start on that right now. All right. So the first thing is how to code the head section. I said this yesterday, but I want to say it again. And that is metadata is known as data about data. You've already seen some examples of metadata in here. They start with meta. All right. There are more meta tags than the ones that are shown here. These are considered the 2 you should always put in. We'll look at, I think they'll show them in the chapter here, some of the other ones. Now, you will read either in this book or you might hear it. You should put in this meta tag and this meta tag and this meta tag because it helps with search engine optimization. All right. That may or may not be true, but since none of us that I know of work for Google or Bing or Yahoo, I'm not sure if that's true or not. All right. I've heard other people say, no, search engines could care less as long as you have these two in there. So I guess it just depends on what you believe. And then we'll look at favicons. What are favicons? The thing that's up here where you see the little pictures. So you might not be able to tell, but this is our markup service. And the favicon for here it says W3C. All right. You never have to create a favicon. And if you don't, you'll get a default one. All right. But some people really like to put in favicons. So as it says, the link element can be used in the head section to link to a custom icon called a favicon. All right. So as we take a look in here, all right, notice there's at least one new meta tag if you look at the example on page 75 here, and it is description. All right. Now I'm gonna say something to you, and it may make sense. It may not make any sense to you. Typically, when you submit an entire website to Google or to Bing or to Yahoo or to all of them or to some other search engine, all right, what happens is you give them all the pages that are in the site. You can have, and you're going to learn this in a later chapter, you can have a certain file that you put in there that's called, I think it's called robots.txt. And in that file, you put every file that, in that particular file. Yeah, you put every other file that system to look through. In other words, let's say that it was something with payroll and it had personal information or whatever it happened to be. All right, if that doesn't make any sense, don't worry about it. All right, right now. But the point is this. Typically, if you put in something like description in content, what happens is there are programs that are written for these search engines, and these programs look through your website. It's called spidering a website as they crawl through it. All right. And if you do put in something like description and content, it looks through that page and it wants to see if indeed the content that's in here is on that page. Now, I'll tell you something, and I read this a long time ago. This is before some of you right now were even born. But if you either were around or probably what 9/11 was. All right. But after 9/11, I'd read an article where a bunch of people were putting in here for the description. They were putting in 9/11 for the description. And their website had nothing to do with 9/11. But they were doing it thinking that that would get more hits or whatever. I don't understand that. All right. Remember, anything that's put in a head section does not show directly on the screen unless it's the title, like this, or it's the favicon, like this. All right. The other thing too is what if I decided that I wanted a favicon on here? So I went over to my phone, I took a picture of me, and I wanted to make that into a favicon. Can I do that? The answer is typically yes, believe it or not. So you come in here and you Google online free favicon maker, something like that. And let's see, the best favicon generator completely free. All right. And literally with some of these, you go in here. What do you want to do? Well, let me just grab something, okay? So I'm going to go out here to images.google.com and let's put in here dogs. All right. And I'm going to grab this dog. We'll grab this one. It's a pretty nice picture. And I'll save the image as, and it's a JPEG. All right. And you typically don't do this, but I'm going to save it instead of a JPEG as a PNG file. So I'm going to say dog.png. All right. So now I've got that file saved on my system. All right, why am I showing you this? Because now I'm going to go here and I'm going to say ping to ICO. All right, and it says, what file do you want to use? All right, and I'm going to go back. There's my dog.ping, and I'm going to put that in there. I didn't take it, but it looks, there you go. Download. All right, and it gives me a bunch of different sizes. But if I open up one of these, like 16 by 16, if I open it, it's very hard to see. I can make it bigger. It's going to be look out of focus, but that's my dog. And it's been recreated as a favicon. So if you are asked to create your own favicon on a test, that's one of the easier ways of doing it. This is not the only one, but favicon, I think it's favicon.io. It's one I've used before because it's pretty intuitive. At least I thought it was. It wasn't hard to go in there and do all that. Right? Not a heck of a lot of effort. So they give you some guides here. I'm not going to read them to you, but they tell you the importance of metadata and how it's used. One thing to realize is when you use a title, the title, as it said, should describe the content of the page. All right, did we do that? Let's see if we succeeded or failed there. For title, we said document. I didn't change it. If this is the home page, what a lot of people do, let's pretend that we had a website. Let's say this is a whole website. All right, and we're creating our own sporting goods store. Instead of Dick's, I'm going to call it Jeff's. So I'm going to put in here Jeff's, and I'll put in here this, and I'll say home, like that. All right, and now I'll open it with live server. And now it says, and it does, if I go down here, it'll show me all of it right there. All right, but you only get a certain number of characters. You don't want to put 3,000 letters in. Well, that's the second time my internet flagged out. Okay, so there's different ways that you can do this. All right. Let me close a few of these things that we've got open here. All right. So they give you SEO guidelines for metadata, for the title tag, and they even talk about the favicon. One thing with the favicon, you might have noticed I used that 16 by 6 pretty popular size. You don't want to make it real big. If it's too big, it either isn't going to show correctly, or it might make this bigger. I don't know which it does. All right. All right, how to present the contents of a web page. You already know what that laying attribute is. Laying equal English, so we don't have to talk about that. Let's talk about this. It says how to code headings and paragraphs. And in particular, let's go to this page. We already talked about laying. All right, so let's look at these right here. H1 really through H6, a P tag, and there's a lot more of them. These are known as block level elements. What does that mean? That means by default, they are supposed to take up as much of the screen as they can. Some things will say that block style elements are greedy, Greedy, because again, they take up as much room as they possibly can. So notice if I use an H1, that says it should be double whatever my regular font size is. So if my font size is 16 point, and H1 should be 32 point. If my font size is 16 point, then my H2 should be basically what, 24 point. And an H3 should be whatever that 17% is. So instead of 16, maybe 20 point. Paragraph should be that size. You can go in and change any of these, using CSS. So if for some reason I wanted my H1 to be really big, I could do that. One thing I have not mentioned to you, and I'm going to say it right now, there's kind of an unwritten rule with websites. There should only be one H1 tag per page. Do people break that rule? Yes, they do. But an unwritten rule says, and it's usually near the top or at the top. All right, there should only be one H1 tag per page. As many H2, H3, H4, H5, or H6 tags as you need. All right. So again, these are block level elements. You may remember that from before, you may not, but I want to show you one more time. And that is, I'm going to come back into here. I'm going to go and say all of my paragraphs. All right. So I'll keep that title. That's fine. But I'm going to say for every paragraph that I have in here, all right, I want the background. So instead of background color, we'll just say background, just to show you that that's okay. We'll make that gray. All right. And we'll make the color white. That should only apply then to paragraphs. All right. So if we go back and I will save this and I will open it up in live server. And you'll notice what I'm trying to get across here is my paragraphs, not the one with title on it, but my other paragraphs, they're block level. Other than a little bit of room on the sides, and we're going to get into what that is in another class, they're taking up 100% of the space that I have. They're greedy. The only reason that this title here didn't take up 100% is, if you remember, one of the things that we did in here was we set the width to 25. If I remove that width, all right, and we'll go back and run this again, everything is taking up 100%. All right. These are block level elements. And again, block level elements are designed to take up as much space as they can. And typically they will have a line above them, a blank line, and a line below them. All right. Now, the thing contrary to those, not block level elements, are called inline elements. They're things that appear inside of block level elements. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to put something in here. This isn't the way I would typically do it, but I just want to show you this. All right. So I'm not really doing good practices right here. I'm going to grab from one of these paragraphs. I'm going to grab this sentence that says nam, whatever the heck all that says. And I'm going to put before it the word strong. All right. And then after the period, I'm going to end that strong. Just like that. And I'm going to save this. And I'm not sure with the coloring we have, if it's going to show or not show. All right. Let's see. It's really hard to see with this color. All right. But that sentence now was bolded. All right. There it is right here. You hopefully can look at it and see that it's darker than the other sentences are. All right. That is an inline tag. Inline tags generally are inside of block level tags. They do not take up the entire line. They're not greedy. They only take up the room that they need to take up. Now, if I grab that right there, like you saw that was strong, all right, and I'm going to grab this thing that says strong right here, and I'm going to go all the way to the end of my paragraph and put it in. All right. Now, when we look at this, that whole paragraph, other than this first sentence, the whole paragraph is bolded. But it still is an inline tag. It starts when we tell it to start. It ends when we tell it to end. All right. So kind of keep that in mind, please, if you would, as we go through this next section. All right, again, I already said this. Use only one H1 tag per page. Again, one of the things I like about this book is their guidelines are tried and true. All right, it's not that they just pull these things out of the air. All right, block level elements, as it says, they're the building blocks of a website. They start on a new line, they take up the full space that they're in. All right. All right, how to code structural elements. I'm going to keep this, we're going to go over it, but I'm going to go over to the W3 school site. Unless they've changed it, there was a really good picture that, let's see, there it is. All right. So these are the semantic elements that you can use in here. Header at the top, footer at the bottom, navigation section, sections, articles, and asides. Let's look at all these and talk about them, and then we'll go back to the book. First of all, not to confuse you, you can have as many headers on a page as you want. If I needed to, I could have a header at the top. I could have a header before this section. I could have a header before this article, a header before this aside. I could even have a header before my footer. I've never seen that, but I could do it. Quite often, the header will include the nav section. Okay. Then kind of look at it again, almost like a newspaper. All right. This is a section. All right. There's a lot of disagreement over what's a section and what's an article. Usually a section is more general, an article is more specific. All right. Maybe if you've ever read a regular newspaper, all right, maybe you've seen this before where, for instance, let's say this was an article right here. All right. And let's say that it was an article, there was a fire someplace. All right. And us, and let's say the Wentzville Fire Department, um, they came back and they answered the call to this fire. And then over here, there was an article about one of the firefighters, how this is his 100th fire since he's been a firefighter. That's what an aside is. It's known as being tangential. In other words, an aside could appear on its own, but typically it's in relation to either a section or to an article. All right. These are all the ones that you can use. The idea, and you're going to see this either later in this chapter, in fact, you will see it later in this chapter. It used to be before you had HTML5, which is, of course, what we're learning in here, rather than these tags, every time you wanted to partition something like this, you used a special kind of tag called a div tag. D as in dog, I, V as in victory. And you had divs all over the place. You'd have a div you might have called header, a div you might have called nav, a div you might have called footer, etc. All right, but when they came up with HTML5, they wanted to make it more semantic, meaning people could look at these different things and figure out what you were trying to do with them. Look in here and there's section. All right, there's article. This is going to be pretty big, but this is going to explain all of these. And again, should you have an article in a section or a section in an article, there's header. They're all explained in here. So we are going to go over them, but if you want a much more detailed explanation, you can go out to here. Sometimes people ask, well, will we need that for a test? Probably not. Not at least directly. I don't know. But you can go out to there. And again, you don't even need this. You can just type in w3schools.com. You can find it from there, or you can put all that in. The other thing that's nice about this, and it made me think of this when we got here, is I'm going to do one more quick search. And I'm putting in W3 Schools HTML tag list. All right. And let's see, list, unordered list, tags list. In a nutshell, come on, it'll come up. Come on. In a nutshell, come on. HTML is just a boatload of tags, and there's somewhere around 100 or so tags. All right, I don't know why that's not coming up, but it's not coming up. Doesn't like it saying about blank here, so let me try it one more time. Look on that one. There we go. So all of the tags, here it is. A to Z tags. The complete list is given below. Yeah, I'll click continue. No, I don't want to click that continue. The point is there's somewhere around 100 of these. This is real good too. It's got every tag. This is the same thing W3 Schools has. And they're in alphabetic order. Some of these tags, I don't know if it'll show it on this list, but I know it does on the W3 Schools list. Some of these tags are known as being deprecated. What that means is they're no longer technically supported. You can still use them, but you shouldn't anymore because they've been replaced with things that are considered to be better. All right. Somebody asked me once, they said, well, what is deprecated? And I said, we're all deprecated, right? None of us will live forever, unfortunately. All right. But the same thing in here, the problem is getting rid of these deprecated tags because there are millions, if not billions, if not trillions already in websites. They'll probably never be removed, but the recommendation is that when you go and you start doing new things, creating new web development, that you not use deprecated tags. There are no HTML police that make sure you don't do that. All right. So again, here are the semantic elements. I'm not going to read them to you. And here's a document where they've got a header. All right. They don't have a nav in here, but we're going to end up putting one in. There's a main and there's a footer. It's not going to look any different. If I went into this document right here, exactly as it is, remove the word header, beginning and end, remove the word main, beginning and end, and remove footer, beginning and end, it would look exactly the same. But the idea is this document is now more semantic. You can tell exactly where the header section is, exactly where the footer section is, and exactly where main is. Main can hold section, article, aside, etc. It can hold all that stuff. All right. So as it says, again, SEO guidelines recommend and accessibility guidelines recommend that you use these. You want to make your site as easy as possible for anyone and everyone to take a look at. Ideally, that's what you want. All right. So divs didn't die. Sometimes you want, if I want to be able to hold this H1 and this P as though they're one unit, I can put them in a div. All right. And again, they won't look any different if I remove this. So you might say, that's fine. Then why would you use it? Because what I can do now is I can come into this div and I can give it an ID or a class, and now it'll apply to everything that's inside of here. So divs are still used, as it says there, to structure content on a page. You will be using them. It says only use div tags when people break these rules all the time. Somebody asked me once, they said, what do you think of a rule like that? I said, a couple weeks ago when we finished class, I went and I visited a friend who lives in Nashville. All right. And while going there, when the speed limit was 70, I kept it around 75. All right. And that said, I was about the only one doing 75 at the time. I wasn't passing anybody and I was getting passed. And it's become that way with speed limits. They're more guidelines than they are written in stone. All right, as it says, before HTML5, divs were used everywhere. They're still used, and they're still used quite a bit, but not as much. All right, block level elements, again, we already looked at some. All right, an inline element does not start as a new line. It's a block element. All right, and here's some of the ones that you can use. I'm not going to look at any of them. You can go and look at examples, and we will be using examples. Now, the ones that are shown here on top, the ones in this first chart, you're probably not going to use that often. The ones down here, more often. And I want to mention too, you may or may not have noticed that earlier when we went in here, I used this tag. There was a strong, and then going back to the other end, there was a strong. The old tag was much easier to use because it was a B tag. All right, B as in bold, like that. And I've got to come back here now, probably, where is that? All right, come back here and go to the end of the line and change that to a B tag. And you might say, well, geez, that's much easier. It's a lot less typing. Not only that, if you look at it, still bolded, other than the first sentence. So why not use that one? Because B tags worked a little bit erratically with browsers, for example, browsers for the blind, when things were read to people. All right. So when they came up with HTML5, they said, we're going to replace B with the word strong, which is more universal in nature. They also replaced I for italics with EM for emphasis. All right, so you should use these. I don't want you to use B tags and I tags. Why? Because it's considered bad practice. All right. And the only other one that I'll mention in this list right here is this span tag. All right. And as it says, an inline element with no meaning. My guess is, and I don't remember how to do it right now, so I don't want to do it and embarrass myself, but you might have seen something like this in the past. Let's see, where, let's just say that the first thing we wanted in here was this. Don't ask me why, but I'm making this up. We wanted to say, once upon a time in the land of Rankin, like that. Okay. Well, I want to come in here and I want to say span. Okay. And I'll end it here. And I only want to use that letter O. All right. So that O and once. Now I've got to remember how to do this. So I'm going to Google it so I don't embarrass myself in front of you. Hopefully that's enough. How to increase the font size, one word in a line. So it's something like this. So let's see. They show it here. They're using classes. I want to use a span here. All right, there's other ways of doing it, but I'll do it the way they're showing it here. I'll say here, class equals, we'll just call it big. All right. And then I'm going to come back. There's another way of doing it, but I'll just do it like this. And I'm going to say here, dot big, and we'll say font size, rem. We'll talk about rems and ems and stuff in a later class. Let me save this. And you can see the difference. The O and once upon a time. So you use spans typically inside of divs or inside of block elements if you only want to basically work on something that's inside of that block element. All right, that was not a great explanation, but for now, I think it will suffice. All right, again, it says you can use B and I, but don't. It's better to use M and strong, as I've already mentioned. All right. Character entities, these are kind of neat. This is not a complete list. All right. But if I want the copyright symbol, I may have shown you that yesterday. You can say ampersand copy. All right. There's some other ones that are here too. Again, I'm not going to do this now, but if we go to W3 schools and we look at the list of character entities, I think there's somewhere upwards of 100. All right. So if I want this to show, I can type in this. If I want a less than sign to show, I can type in this, etc. All right, special types of text. We're going to hit on this later. Block quotes for a quotation. What that'll typically do is center something, and it might even italicize it. Address is designed also to make all the text look the same. Pre is kind of neat. All right, if you remember one of the things that I showed you before, we did this. All right, I'll just come back to this paragraph we have here. It's just a garbage paragraph anyway. And I'm going to say, hello out. I don't want output. Hello there. Hello world. How are you? Like that. All right. And if I save this, you saw this already. All right. It just ate up all the white space. All right. But if I come in here and I do this, instead of a P, I'm going to make this pre. All right. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to tab this. And I'll tab this a few times, and I'll hit the space bar a bunch of times, and I don't need that blank line. Now notice what happens. See how it looks? So if I want something to be able to preserve me putting in spaces and any kind of white space, etc., I can use pre-tags. Believe it or not, they're not used very often and they're not recommended because most people find them confusing, but you can use them if you'd like. All right. All right, we're just about done, so let's finish, but then we'll take one more break. So quoting URLs we've already looked at. All right, and they talk in here about the difference between an absolute URL and a relative URL. An absolute URL looks like this. It starts with HTTP or HTTPS or FTP, but it's the whole thing. Relative is relative to where you currently are. All right. And it's important that you understand the distinction. So an absolute URL is the complete thing. Relative is based on where you currently are. And that's what they're saying in here. Okay. All right, coding links. We went over the href yesterday. I'll let you take a look at this. Pretty much, it just makes sense. What you should never do is to say something like click here to see more and have the word here be this. Whatever you have underlined in here, and it doesn't have to be underlined. We'll talk about that in a later class too. But whatever you have as your link should actually be what's going to show. You should never say click here. That's just considered poor practice. All right. You can work with the colors. If you've got a link, it's blue by default. Once you click on it, it's purple. You can change those colors if you want to. You can change it so when you hover over it, it's a different color. When you click on it, but you haven't let go yet, it's a certain color. And as it says, we'll have more in chapter 7. Okay. Lists we've looked at, there's not much more to say here. We looked at unordered lists and we looked at ordered lists. I did that on purpose yesterday. They both consist of list items. There is another kind of list that's called a definition list. It's a DL. It's not used very often. All right, because you can typically make things look much nicer. All right, with ordered and unordered lists. Again, more in chapter 7. Images we've talked about. I will tell you the example they show here, this is a crummy example. You should never, under any circumstances, if you're putting an image tag like this inside of this, you should never put a size attribute in there like height or width. That should always go in CSS. It's not that you can't do it. It's considered a poor practice to do it. All right. We talked yesterday about source and alt, and I even showed you height and width with that chocolate chip cookie yesterday. Here are some common type of image formats. All right. JPEGs, GIFs, and PNGs. I don't know why it's not added in here, but there is another one. That is WEBP, and those are Google's newest type of images. All right. Always include the alt tag. Yeah, that's true. Unless it's a decoration. Like if it's a picture of a flower that's just on the side, you might not want to put anything in there. But again, why do you want to put in an alt tag? Two reasons, as I mentioned yesterday. One reason is for people who cannot see. A browser for the blind will read what the alt tag is. The other is if you somehow put in a wrong file name, it'll show that alt text. So you can see at least what should be showing. All right, and the last thing that's in here is they've got this structured web page. Not much to it, really. There it is. But they show you what it looks like, and they show you the HTML. Take a look at it when you get time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And that's it for chapter 2. So it is a little later, I'm sorry. It's 10:21. Let's take till 10:35. And when we come back in 14 minutes at 10:35, we will go over and take a look at what homework you're supposed to be doing, what labs you're supposed to be doing, what written tests you're supposed to be doing. I'll see you in about whatever that is. What did we say? 10:35 in about 13 minutes. number on mine. All right, it is 10:35, so I'm going to start back up. And I want to mention something. I just realized right now I made an error. Not that it's the first time, but this is the URL that I'd sent you for the repository, and that shouldn't have said AWD1100. It should have said AWD1000. So how do I change that? Well, there it is right there. If I go over to what's called my settings in GitHub, I'm going to go to settings. You'll notice right at the top, there's a rename. All right. So I'm going to change that from 1100 to 1000 and tell it to rename it. And now it's been renamed. Now what I sent you is fine. You can use that one. But because enough people have asked, how do I get all this stuff to work? I'm going to grab that one now and show you what I would do. We're going to talk about the homework and stuff, but just give that a couple seconds, okay? Now, what I'm going to show you what I would recommend, you don't have to do it this way, but this is the way I would recommend you to do it. All right. So what I'm going to do is with this AWD 1100, I'm going to click code and I'm going to go down to where it says download zip and click. And it's going to download it right now into my downloads folder. And it'll let me know when it's done. Again, what I'm showing you right now, you don't have to do it this way. You might find what I'm about to show you to be the easiest way of doing it. I don't know. Everybody's different. There's quite a bit, so it's going to, there it is. Okay, so I now have a folder that says AWD 1100 Fall 2023 Students dash master.zip. I'm going to grab that folder. I'm going to right mouse click on it. I'm going to drag it to my desktop and I'm going to say to extract, which means to open it. But again, I'm pretending right now I'm you. Okay. So instead of having it say AWD 1100 Fall 2023 students, I'm going to use my name here. Now I'm Jeff Scott. Of course, if you're Mark Smith, you would say Mark Smith. If you're Mary Jones, you'd say Mary Jones there, etc. So I'm telling it to open on my desktop as AWD 1000 Fall 2023 Jeff Scott. And I'm going to say extract, which will open it. Now this will take upwards of a minute or so. It's actually going pretty fast today. Once this comes up, and as it will in just a moment, I'm going to change over to my desktop. All right, so I'll give it a second here. Okay, so now I'm going to change over to my desktop. All right, and on my desktop, amongst other things, I now have a folder called, there it is, AWD Fall 2023 Jeff Scott, right there. All right, now what I'm going to do is on my desktop here, I'm going to create 4 folders. All right, so I'm going to have one here that's going to say AWD not 11, I'm sorry, AWD1000. And I'm going to call it, instead of, well, fall 2023 is fine, fall 2023. And I'm going to call it Jeff Scott, but I'm going to put in there HOTS. And that's going to hold all my hands-on tests. Then I'm going to create a second folder. And I'm going to grab everything from here except the HOTS. And I'm going to call this one written tests. Then I'm going to create a third folder. And I'm going to call this one AWD1100 Fall 2023 Jeff Scott Labs. And I'm going to create one more. And I'm going to put on the end of that homework. Now, you don't have to do this because I now have 4 different folders, which means that basically I'm going to end up with 4 different GitHub repositories. I'm going to have to make 4 repos in GitHub, one with each of these names. All right. But now what I can do is I can come over here and under HTML, CSS, I'll do it here. Here's homework. So I'm going to find my homework one here, and I'll make a folder in here that says HTML, CSS, just like that. All right. Now I'm going to come in here and drag this homework into that folder. So I'll copy it there just so I don't screw it up. And that should take just a matter of seconds. Then into my next folder, which is called Labs, I'll make another folder in there again called HTML, CSS. And into that folder, I will grab Labs and put that in there and copy it there. Then in my next folder, all right, which is called Written Tests, I will make a folder called HTML, CSS. And I will drag my written tests in there and copy it. The one that's called HOTS, I'm going to leave empty because we haven't had any hands-on tests yet. Now I have 4 different folders, 4 different main folders, one that I will use to hold my written tests, one that I will use to hold my labs, one that I will use to hold my hands-on tests, and one for my homework. All right. So let's take a look at what's in there. Let's start with the written tests. All right. So here's written tests, CSS, HTML, CSS, boom. Well, it's only the 3rd time the internet's flaked out. I could make in here, for instance, another folder called JS, and later that'll hold my JavaScript written tests. I can make another one in here, in the labs one, that's called JS, and I could drag all that stuff into. I'm not going to do that, but you get the idea, or hopefully you do. But I'm going to go into my written tests because sometimes this confuses people. And in here, written tests, let's just open up number 1. All right, first of all, I have to enable editing, otherwise I can't do anything. So I'm going to enable editing. I like to have everything on one page, so I'm going to click View One Page, and I'm going to make it bigger so you can all see it. So a web browser is a program that runs on a web server, starts when an HTTP request is made, starts when a web server sends a page to a client, and is a program that runs on a client computer. All right. I think it's D. I'll have to go back and check it. But what do I do to show that one? There's different ways you can do this. Typically what people do is they highlight the one and then they make it a different color. So they go to home and they make it, let's say, blue, and maybe even bold it. Well, if that's a little too close to the black, then make it another color. Make it red. All right. Number 2, The internet consists of many wide area networks, one wide area network, thousands of local. All right, let's say at least it's B. So I'm going to go in there and do the same thing. That way, when I save this, I'll be able to tell when I grade it what your answers are. All right. I've had people in the class who said, well, I took the one that it was and I just bolded it. Then they forget to bold some of them. So it looks like there's no answer. So I'd suggest you do it like this. If you only want to take the letter and highlight it, you can do that. I need some way for you to show me what you thought the answer was to that question. All right. So what we will do tomorrow, amongst other things, is we are going to together go over the chapter 1 and the chapter 2 and the chapter 3 written tests. The other ones for the HTML part, you're doing on your own. All right. Then when we get to the JavaScript portion of the class, we'll do the same thing where we'll do the first couple as a class. All right. So I'll do this. And then when you're done, make sure to save it. And then you can close this. Hopefully you get the idea from that. And again, if I want to, I can come over here and where I've got that folder that I just brought in here, this one. All right. Again, I could open that, open AWD, go to JavaScript, copy all that stuff over too. All right, so I could copy over the written tests into here, the labs, and the homework. I'll let you do that on your own. You don't have to watch me do that. All right, so that's the written tests, whichever one that was. That's this one. Again, the hands-on test, we haven't had any yet. All right, tomorrow we will do a pre-test. If we want, we could put that into here. All right, so let's look next. We've got labs and we've got homework. So let's look at both of those. So here's the labs. All right, and it's in a folder called labs. And what it is, if we look in here, okay, is shape up. It's a thing that has, we're going to end up making a website and we're going to keep making changes to it and changes to it. And eventually we'll get to something that looks more like this. So if you look in here, we'll have navigation, we'll have a logo, we'll work with colors. Notice there's different colors here. That's called a gradient. We'll create a form in here. This is all stuff that we will be working on as we go through the semester. All right. So this is what's in here, the shape up. And the other one that's in here under homeworks, it's a similar one, but it's a Halloween superstore. So we start very small. All right. And then we'll end up with something like this, where again, if you look in here, there's a gradient. We've got a logo. We've got stuff with coloring. All right. We've got in here, as you can see, we've got navigation. We've got buttons on the side, a picture, etc. All right. I just made, all right, I decided that between these two, what we will do all semester long is, as a class, we'll do these Halloween superstores. You still have to do them, but we'll do every exercise as a class. All right. So we'll do all the homeworks together. For the labs, the number that's there corresponds to the number of the chapter. So the first one we have to do for labs is chapter 3. So we'll do that one together tomorrow. So tomorrow when you come in here, we will start by doing the written tests for chapters 1, 2, and 3. All right. Then, just to make sure there still are no problems people have. When we get done with these, I will show you again. I will go in to GitHub, I will create a repo, and I will upload it. I will go through all those steps with you. All right. I don't want to do that for the homework in the labs because then you could just copy these. All right. I want you to actually, this is where you're going to learn. All right. You're either going to get this stuff or you're going to struggle with it. And if you struggle with it, look at that as being a good thing because eventually you're going to get it. So we will go over this one tomorrow, this Shape Up 3, and only that one because the next one is for chapter 4. And we haven't gone through 4 yet. Then after we get done with that, we will go through the homework. And again, that's that Halloween Superstore. We will do all these, but the only one we'll do tomorrow will be 3 for that one. So when you come in tomorrow, we will first do the written tests for chapters 1, 2, and 3. Then we will do the lab for chapter 3. Then we will do the homework for chapter 3. Collectively, that'll probably take around an hour. Might be more, probably won't be any less. Let's say an hour and a half with a break. All right. So that brings us to about 9:30. Tomorrow, and it's my responsibility to do this, what I will have to do tomorrow is I will have to come in and create my own pretest based off of what the actual test that you do on Thursday will look like. I will do that, and we will go over that pretest. Now, after we do that, so let's say it's 9:30, I'll give you about an hour till 10:30, and I'll be online, but I won't be taping. All right. You'll be working on that. Then we'll come back again collectively, and so there'll be a second taping, and we'll come back at 10:30, and I'll do that pretest for you from scratch. That should prepare you on Thursday, for the work that you have to do. And again, if you didn't hear this yesterday, on Friday, I'm having some nasal surgery that was supposed to happen last week, but didn't. So Friday is going to be a lab day. I'm actually taking Friday off as a vacation day. Not what I desire to do, but it's what I am going to do. All right. And the last thing I wanted to remind you of, all right. I mean, today we went over chapter 2, and today we went over chapter 3. If you have any questions on chapter 2 or on chapter 3 or even on chapter 1, feel free to email me with those questions. If you are struggling with VS Code, I've given you a couple resources. You can Google VS Code. You can go to YouTube and Google VS Code, all right, etc. There are a lot of resources out there. I even showed you a URL I sent you this morning with a free 4-hour course. I will tell you if you go through that, because I looked at the first 15 minutes or so, and the gentleman who's teaching it, English is not his first language. And sometimes that bothers people because you have a language understanding. I could understand him just fine. All right. All right. Then for GitHub, I again gave you today both that URL from the Learn Git in 15 minutes from Cold Steel and the Learn GitHub in 20 minutes from Cold Steel. I also gave you a list of the commands for Git, and on that list it has more URLs. Some of the URLs in there are what are called they're not for videos or anything. They're for articles. Now, one thing I'm going to have to show you, and I'll have to send you this URL, okay? And that is this. and it's how to send a GitHub invite. What does that mean? Well, let's see. I know that I've used it before, so I don't know which one it is, but let's see. This is probably it. Okay, I'll look in, if this isn't the right one, I'll make sure I find it. What you will have to do is whether you use one repository or you break it up like I just did into 4 repositories. Regardless of the way you do that, if you break it up into 4 repositories, you're going to have to send me a personal invite to each repository. I'll go over tomorrow how to do that. It is not difficult. If you use only one repository and put everything in there, then you'll only have to give me one invite. All right. I have found that typically people who break it up into 4 repositories, it's easier for them to separate their stuff. They're not constantly putting things in the wrong place. You may agree with that. You may not agree with that. All right. And again, if you need help with GitHub, I've already mentioned this yesterday, that you can, there is a GitHub. Well, let's do Git first. All right. And there is a Git, and I don't remember what it was, but let's just put in here Git. And that Git-SCM. So if you're struggling with this, there is that book. Even though it's a little dated, it'll tell you how to do things. All right. And again, if I put in here how to use GitHub, you'll get a lot of stuff. There are courses out here, but there's also this. Get started with GitHub documentation. There's a quick start for that. I will tell you, there are probably 50 things that you can do with GitHub. We're only doing about 10% of those because GitHub is also designed to be a tool where you can share information. So if there was a group of you working on a project, you'd be able to share that information. All right. You can do what's called fork, F-O-R-K. So you can fork a repo, and there's a bunch of other stuff. We're not doing that in here, but there is some good documentation in here as well. All right. Finally, and I mentioned this to you because one of the students mentioned it to me, if you are interested in possibly forming some kind of a study group, I've got a student who I think would be in charge of doing it. She took a class with me last semester. She's very, very intelligent, and I think she'd do a good job of setting it up. If you're interested, just send me an email, say, yes, you can use my email address. If you're not interested at all, either don't send me anything or send me an email that says, no, thanks, I'm not interested. All right. So what the other thing we went over chapter 2 today. We went over chapter 3 today. I am showing you right now, and we're going to do the homework and the labs and the first 3 written tests together tomorrow. And I will show you how to upload all of those as well. All right. So with that, even though it's a little early, we're an hour early as opposed to yesterday. All right. It is just about 11 o'clock, but that's all I can think of for today. We'll start right up with what I told you tomorrow at 8:05. I'll see you. Until then, have a good day.